So welcome back to another episode, and today I thought I'd look back on past console launches, or should I say, the games that launched during that time. Now, I'm not going to mention every single console or every single game, and some of the games that I mention are in the launch window. I'm going to cheat on a couple of them for sure, but I want to talk about some that really were highlights to me. Now, I have to go back to 1987 for this one, and I went over to a friend's place, and I didn't know what launch games were back then. I didn't have any clue. Games just came out, things just happened. I didn't know. But I went to my friend's place, and as I've told the story many times, he goes, "You want to play my Nintendo?" And I'm like, "What the heck is that?" And boom, there was Super Mario Brothers. And I was mesmerized. I couldn't believe the graphics, the side view action, the secrets within the level itself. I was like, "You can play this?" And he gave me the controller, and I immediately, ran down and died. But I was hooked. I was completely changed. I was like, this is the future of console gaming. And that one particular game stood out. I didn't know how important it would be in history. I thought it'd just be a one-off game that I would play that Saturday afternoon. But no, it would become a legacy that would go on for many, many years. And that's a launch game that I will never forget. And, a little bit after that, I got my own NES, and I got to play that, and I got to experience the game and finish it. And that's what changed my life when my father said to me, "Hey, what are you going to do now? You just finished Super Mario Brothers 1. And I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Why don't you get another game?" And I've gotten a few games since. Now, not all the launch games were absolutely stunning back in the past. The Genesis came out, and of course I wanted this thing more than anybody. I was a big Sega fan from the Sega Master System, so the Genesis was like, wow, can't wait to get this at home and play all those amazing arcade games. Where I got one arcade game that I was happy to get, but I didn't particularly ask for, and it came packed in with the system, and it's become a bit of a meme, a bit of a joke over the years, and that game is Altered Beast. Yes, the game where you play as gigantic men that get bigger and bigger, that turn into monsters and destroy everything on the screen. You can finish the game in under an hour. It's very, very easy to beat. But my God, I finished it so many times. Everybody came over. It was one of the games that I had. So I said, "Hey, you want to play Altered Beast?" And you could play with your friends as well. So it kind of was awesome, and it kind of was over so fast that it was kind of like, oh, okay. Thank God it was packed into the system. If I paid full price for this, I might have been a little bit upset. And I think Sega felt that way as well. That's why they made it a pack-in game. And it's a fun launch game. I will always look back on it with fond memories and go, "Goddamn Altered Beast." Okay, here's another launch game that nobody asked for, nobody even knew what it was, and people still to this day either love it or hate it, and I love it, I love it, I love it. And this is on the TurboGrafx. The launch game was Keith Courage in Alpha Zones, based on an anime from Japan called Wataru. Again, they brought this over. It had no history in America, so everybody's like, "What is this?" It's kind of like Mario, but it's not, and you get into a mech suit and fight things, and there's all these characters within the game that you don't really know who they are, but you don't need to. You just kind of get into the game and enjoy it. It's a pack-in title. I think it's kind of like Altered Beast because it's over very, very fast. If they did it as a single game on its own, you would have finished it one afternoon and go, "Oh my God, I spent $80 on that." It's like a little too much, but I love Keith Courage. It's very nostalgic. I remember going up, there used to be stores here in Canada called Radio Shacks, and I'd always see it playing on the kiosk. And I was like, look at the graphics, look at the colors, look at the animation, look at the size of the characters. And I'm coming off, Mario Brothers and all that kind of stuff. So it looked incredible. It looked like the future. And unfortunately, the TurboGrafx had no future. I didn't know that till a bunch of years later, but boy, did I enjoy that machine during that time. And Keith Courage was a fun launch game. It was. Now, the Super Nintendo was coming out, and everybody in my neighborhood was losing their minds. And we all knew that one game was coming out in particular that we're really looking forward to, Super Mario World. And get this game could have been sold separately, but it was packed in. When I went down to the States with my parents, they're like, "Yeah, like, you want to pick up a Super Nintendo?" I was like, "You really? You want to pick me one up?" They're like, "Yeah." I picked it up. We brought it home. It had Super Mario World there as a pack-in. I didn't need to buy any other games. I played it at the end of summer, and I loved it. It was so awesome, and I think why Super Mario World is so good is because of the colors, the amount of colors that we could see, the amount of things on the screen, the animation, the amount of secrets. Felt like it was a lot more. The worlds were a lot bigger. And I love the overhead world map and stuff like that, and they expanded on the world of Mario quite well in this, with Yoshi was in there as well. I loved the game. I finished it multiple times. And whenever I hear that music, it always takes me back to the Super Nintendo launch. And wow, I applaud that as a launch game. I still can't believe it was. Now we'll stick with Nintendo for another second here for the Nintendo 64 and Mario 64. One of the biggest jumps in video gaming history that I have ever seen, no pun intended, because we were going from 2D and overhead games to fully 3D games. It was happening with the PlayStation, it was happening with the N64. When I saw Mario 64 for the very first time, I've talked about it multiple times on the channel. You can go back and see all the videos. Just type in Mario 64 memories. I talked about it years ago. It was remarkable. It was life-changing. It was shocking. And I still to this day say we will never see a change in video games, like a jump like that, ever again. Because it was so drastic. I mean, you just knew that you were playing the future. And through games after that were all 3D. They have been for years, but seeing Mario run around in a world in 3D, my imagination was exploding. I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the screen, and it was remarkable. And then, we got other amazing games like Wave Race, and I could go on, but I just wanted to talk about Mario 64 and the amazingness that was when it first launched. That was one hell of a title, and Nintendo was smart. They packaged that separately, at first, so you had to buy the game, and I nearly didn't get the game in the lineup, but the people in front of me were absolutely stupid and were like, oh, we don't want a copy of Mario 64. Do you want it? And I was like, yes, please. Later on, they're like, oh, actually, we changed our minds. Can we get it back? And I'm like, nope. Now, let's talk about Sega for a moment here. And let's talk about a beautiful machine known as the Dreamcast. Every time I talk about this machine, I get a small tear. There's something so beautiful about the Dreamcast, about the idea of the Dreamcast. And I'm telling you, it was about the launch lineup as well, because the launch lineup was incredibly strong. The two games that had me sold without a question, actually it was three games, you want to be technical, were Sonic Adventure, Power Stone, and Blue Stinger. Those three games absolutely had to have system sellers. They were system sellers. For Sonic Adventure alone, and let me say something, I'm going to say something kind of controversial. I've enjoyed Sonic over the years, right? I've enjoyed Sonic, but Sonic Adventure, that was my Sonic game. That was the game that I really jumped into, and it was an adventure. And it was so cool to run around these gigantic levels and explore. That was more my Sonic game, that's for sure. And I really, really embraced it. And I even enjoyed Sonic Adventure 2. I'm still waiting for Sonic Adventure 3 one day. Who knows if that ever happens. But, oh my god, and Power Stone. What a beautiful moment in time that was by Capcom. But that Dreamcast launch, you couldn't go wrong with any game you bought back then. It was such a great launch. And yeah, the swan song for Sega, sadly. Now, I just want to mention the PlayStation 2 launch was in North America in October 2000. Now, I gotta say something. I did not get one right away. I waited a year because the launch lineup wasn't very exciting. There was some kind of okay games, but nothing where I needed to play it that day. Where a year later, when I finally picked up a PlayStation 2, look at the games I was able to get. Devil May Cry. What an awesome game this was. Final Fantasy X and Metal Gear Solid 2. These are the two games here specifically that made me buy a PlayStation 2. And it was so worth it. Finally, that Christmas, when I could get both of these games a year later. But the PS2 to start with didn't come out flying. It took about a year to really start cooking. Now, the GameCube was coming out. And a lot of people were like, where's Mario? Where's the big Mario game? Instead, we got this brand new Luigi's Mansion game. And it turned off a lot of people, including my own friends. They never got it. I was there on day one, of course, back then, picking up my GameCube, give me my Luigi's Mansion and my Wave Race. And I went home and I played it, and it was absolutely amazing. And then at the time, I'd lost my job, and all of a sudden I had to pay my rent. I couldn't, so I had to return my GameCube and those launch games back to EB Games, and I was so sad. So I only had it for like about a week, and they're like, "You returning this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of need the money back." And then finally, EI kicked in for me. I got all the money for that, and I was able to buy the GameCube back a few weeks later, so happiness did return. But I gotta say, Wave Race at the time and Luigi's Mansion, we had no idea that this was gonna be a franchise that would continue forward and would get a big fan base finally, because it didn't have it there at first. I remember everybody saying, "Oh my god, the GameCube is doomed because of Luigi's Mansion." And I was like, it's saved because of Luigi's Mansion. Now, Microsoft was jumping into the console market, and everybody was like, what? This is happening? This is a thing? And they launched this gigantic machine, the Xbox. And I was like, oh, it's really big and green and strange, and it's really a gigantic console. And then they launched with this great game. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't play till a few years later, and that was Halo Combat Evolved. This for me, I know a lot of people played GoldenEye and Doom and all that, and I got to see all those games back then, but I wasn't really invested in them. Where when I played Halo for the very first time, it was like the very first time I'd ever played a first-person shooter. It became my thing for me, and I couldn't believe how immersed I was into the aliens, environments, and going around through the game. Incredible stuff. I mean, Halo really, it was a surprise game. I didn't know I was going to be playing it. My friend lent me an Xbox. I'm like, oh, he's got Halo in it. I guess I'll give it a go. I remember up late at night, and then playing split screen with my friends in multiplayer. Great stuff. What a launch game. Halo was a big deal back then. Now, the Xbox 360 was coming out, and I was like, oh, am I going to pick one up? And I'm like, absolutely. I love the design of the machine, and I'm like, yes, I got to pick it up for sure. But it was one game that took me over the edge to absolutely get it, and that was for Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I remember seeing all the demos of this game and having the creators talking about how big the world was and how you could explore anything and how all of the dungeons were handcrafted. And I was salivating at the mouth. I was like, I've got to play this game. And I did, and I finished it, and I loved it, and I was totally immersed in that world. And I couldn't believe how gigantic it was, and the in graphics at that time. To see the world building that they had done in Oblivion was awesome on the Xbox 360. Now, the Wii launch, I sat up all night for the Wii launch. I finally got in at EB Games at 9 in the morning. I finally got my copy of that game, and the game for me for that system was Twilight Princess. And I almost got into a fist fight in the store because we walked in, and all of a sudden all the employees are like, oh, there's only like 1 or 2 copies of Twilight Princess left. And we all jumped up to grab it. I remember like elbowing somebody in the head, and I was like, I've got my copy right here. And you know what? I went home, I plugged it all in, and I started to play it, and I was like, what's wrong with the graphics? And the graphics were standard definition. I even had component cables that were, ordered. They hadn't shown up yet. And so I was like, I had to play on AV cables on a high definition TV. It was a nightmare. The component cables came, and it looked a little bit better, and I definitely enjoyed the experience, but it will always be hurt by the launch of the machine. It was standard definition. Everybody else was playing, high definition games, and that kind of hurt that for me a little bit, but I got to play it years later, looking a lot better, and I was really thrilled about that. But that launch is one that I will never forget for the Wii. Now, I'm going to end this by talking about the Nintendo Switch. And this was a surprising one. I remember going over to my friend Victor Lucas's. He had gotten a Nintendo Switch early from Nintendo, and I was sneaking over into his basement, and we were playing Zelda Breath of the Wild about a week early. And I was like, this is the most amazing thing I have ever seen. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, this is... Like, it started becoming like it was a great Zelda game, but all of a sudden, how big it was and how vast it was, the amount of things you could do in it. and how it kind of captured the essence for me of what The Legend of Zelda, the original one on the NES, was. It captured that experience and then some, and what they did with the physics and the engine. All of a sudden, something started happening in my brain, and I'm playing the game. I'm like, this is remarkable. Then I got my own copy of the game, and I finished the game. And I remember even thinking at one point, I will never get through this game. It is way too vast, way too big. It's bigger than me, and it was bigger than me. That's for sure. But at that point, it became, this is the crazy thing, a launch game became my favorite video game of all time, a 10 out of 10 video game, Zelda, Breath of the Wild. And I remember going on and on about it, and people were like, oh, no, you're just saying that. You're overhyped. Because you're playing it, it's kind of fun for you, because it's a launch game. I was like, no. And it's years later for me now, and I still feel that way. The adventure that I felt playing that game, I pulled my chair right close to the TV. The TV was right here. I had my Pro Controller, and I was honestly transported to another world. And it was so exciting. I didn't know what was coming around the corner. I didn't know what was hidden around the next bend. It rubbed, every single itch I've ever had for a fantasy RPG, action game. That's what Zelda Breath of the Wild was. I didn't know it was going to become my favorite video game of all time when I first played it all the way back then, but it did. So, guys, what are some launch games that you really enjoyed? Let me know down below for sure, because I just mentioned a few. I haven't mentioned every system at all, for sure, because there's so many to mention and all that. So let me know what your favorite launch games were from systems of the past. So anyways, guys, until next time.